The home of the common Joe and the common Sally in the know, even more so than all those media talking heads. Alabama 19, Oklahoma 17. Is that a football score? Is that a prediction of a football score? No. That's how many players have went into the transfer portal from Alabama and Oklahoma. A record number. Some people might be worried. They might think that might mean bad things for Alabama and Oklahoma. But is it? Or is it a good purge kind of thing? Let's talk about it. Well, here we go again. Another episode of the OCF, that's the Outlaw of College Football. That's me, JPC. And I can also be found on Twitter at OCF Productions. This video that I'm doing today, once again, is inspired to me by one of our loyal listeners and commenters, that being Michael McCulloch. Thank you, Michael, for this inspiration. Now, getting right to it. It seems like Alabama and Oklahoma have had a lot of players into the transfer portal. That's got a lot of Alabama fans and a lot of Oklahoma fans worried, and that's reasonable. I mean, that is a record number of players. But if you look around, there's been a lot of players transferring out of colleges this year. We've already got almost 800 players entered into the transfer portal already in this season. And I think back in 2021 or 2022, they said there was almost 3,000 players. I may be wrong about that stat, but that's a lot of players to be transferring out. But the thing with the transfer portals, we learned, man, it's just like you're swapping players almost. I mean, sometimes you get players that work out, and sometimes you get players that are just straight up duds. They didn't work out their other they didn't work out for their other team because they basically just weren't that good. And you're going to get a lot of that. You're going to find some diamonds in the rough, and then you're going to have some that just don't work out. But everybody thinks because Alabama and Oklahoma have had a lot of these transferring out, that's a bad sign for these two universities. And I'm using these two as an example because they're closer to me than most teams. And the thing with Alabama is their recruiting classes are so high. I mean, Alabama has finished number one as the number one recruiting class numerous times under Saban, probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 times in his coaching career. He's probably finished with the number one class. So with another record-breaking number one class coming in, it's no surprise that you have some of these guys transferring out. What you have is addition by subtraction, as they call it. Because a lot of these players just can't cut it. The most surprising transfers out for Alabama were JoJo Earl and Tommy Brockmeyer. He left his twin brother behind. They were twin brothers. Their family had both went to Texas. They were legacy players whose families went to Texas. So it was a surprise that they committed to begin with. But for one twin to leave and one twin to stay, it's sort of a surprise to me. And JoJo Earl seemed like he's doing pretty well at Alabama. So there might be the only two players out of these 19 that were a big surprise. Now, Alabama had mass defections on the offensive line. That could be a concern. Now, as far as Oklahoma goes, their transfers, as you'll see in a graphic I'm going to throw up here in a little bit, Billy Bowman, I think he's a defensive back currently for Oklahoma, or was. He basically said that getting rid of some of these players is something that you have to do. It's sort of a purge, is what he called it. He said, if you don't want to be here and you don't belong, then we don't really need you here. But the players that are coming in, especially with the high-ranking classes Oklahoma has signed the past 2 years, surprisingly, with all the turmoil surrounding the Lincoln Riley departure, Brent Venables has still signed 2 top 10 classes. This class is still not signed, but right now it's sitting at number 7. And we've had a few flips that might actually go to Oklahoma eventually that could make this class a top 5 class once again. And there again is what you have with these players. When he came into the situation, he got rid of some of the players, but you can't get rid of all of them. You got to have some bodies to play football with. And even if those players are not really on the same page with you, you have to make do with what you have until you can get what you need through your recruiting processes. And that's what Brent Venables is doing. That's what Billy Bowman's speaking upon, is these players don't want to really be at Oklahoma. They don't want to be team players. This ain't their thing. This ain't their gig. Well, then they need to move on and make way for people that want to play and people that want to be at Oklahoma or at Alabama. People think the NIL thing is a horrific thing, that it's really ruined college football. And I'm back and forth on that. I think it's good that the players are able to leave and go to other colleges and better themselves and maybe put themselves in a better position to maybe pursue a career in the NFL. But I also think that sometimes they just dip out too early, and it teaches them not to have fortitude and to fight through adversity. Because when they get to if they get to the NFL, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to have to compete with players on a much higher level and be on the bench. And if you can't handle being on the bench sometimes, then you're not going to make it in this industry that they call football. But getting back to Oklahoma and Billy Bowman, I found that article very enlightening. I'm surprised he said some of the things he said. Basically, the word he used was toxicity. He said the only way to get rid of this toxicity is through the NIL. And that's why the NIL is a good thing, is that you can urge and nudge these players out and get the players in that actually want to do things your way and players that want to be a part of your process. Because sometimes things just don't work out. It ain't because, like I said, that they don't have the fortitude sometimes. Sometimes it just don't work out. Austin Stogner is another surprise. I think he may be the first player ever to transfer to another team and transfer back to the same team. Transferred to South Carolina, now he's coming back to Oklahoma where he had his best season before he left. So while Alabama and Oklahoma did lose a lot of players in the transfer portal, you guys and gals do realize that there's a lot of other teams out there that's doing the same thing. They're losing players in the transfer portal. And Alabama and Oklahoma can recruit those players. Not to mention the players they're bringing in from high school. Both Alabama and Oklahoma have both had top 10 classes the last 2 years. Alabama's had like top 1, 2, 3 classes the last 2 years. So with the great talent that they're bringing in and the fact that there's been some coaching turnovers, I think that this is probably more of a good thing for Alabama and Oklahoma, and that they're purging the players that don't want to be here and the ones that just can't make the cut for whatever reason. But you guys and gals, tell me what you think about this whole thing. Do you think the NIL situation is a bad thing for college football? You think it's a good thing? You think it's somewhere in between and that we just got to get assimilated to it like I do? And that's all I got to say about that. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel. And as always, there's a little heart option down here. If you don't mind, click on that. Throw me a few dollars in the coffers. Get me off the YouTube teat. As always, KMCA to all the other teams. Class is now officially dismissed.